The conference room went dead silent the moment Marshall slammed the folder onto the glass table. I was standing at the front mid-sentence, about to present the Hartley campaign update, when he stormed in. His face was red. His jaw was tight. His eyes locked on me like I was the only person in the room worth destroying. Gross negligence. He said those two words loudly enough for the entire floor to hear through the glass walls. Madeline Pierce has single-handedly put our biggest client at risk. Every head turned toward me. Coworkers shifted in their seats. Some stared at the table. Some stared at me. Nobody spoke. I opened my mouth to respond, but Marshall raised his hand. Effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation. He said it calmly, like he had rehearsed it 100 times. The folder skidded across the floor and stopped at my feet. My mind went completely blank. I had worked late every single night that week. I had done everything right. So why did this feel like something he had been planning for a very long time? The door behind me opened slowly. Security was already standing there. I walked out of that conference room with my head up, even though everything inside me was crumbling. Security stayed 2 steps behind me the entire way. People at their desks looked up as I passed. Some whispered to each other. Some turned away quickly like they were afraid to be seen watching. I kept walking, 1 foot in front of the other, past the cubicles, past the break room, past the wall of framed campaign awards that I had helped earn for this company over 4 years. When we reached the lobby, the security guard held the door open without making eye contact. I stepped outside into the cold Chicago air and stood on the sidewalk with my briefcase, watching the revolving door stop spinning behind me. That was when the tears came. I had held them in through the whole walk out, through the stares and the whispers. But standing alone on that sidewalk, with nowhere to go and no explanation for what had just happened, I finally let them fall. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 message. We need to talk. It's about Marshall. I stared at that message for a long time. My first instinct was to ignore it. The last thing I needed was a stranger making things worse. But something about those words stopped me from deleting them. I typed back. Who is this? The reply came quickly. My name is Danica Keene, Marshall's ex-wife. I know what he did to you today, Madeline. I've seen him do it before. My hands were shaking. I was still standing outside the building in the cold wind, but I couldn't make myself move. I didn't know much about Marshall's personal life. He kept everything tightly sealed. But his ex-wife contacting me within hours of my suspension felt like too much of a coincidence to walk away from. How do you know what happened today? I typed back. Because he told me his plan 3 weeks ago, she replied. He's been setting you up. Carefully. And I have proof. My heart was pounding. I looked around the empty sidewalk like someone might be watching. Then a file appeared in the message thread. The label read, Start here. My thumb hovered over it for 1 long moment. Then I pressed open. I opened the file sitting in my car in the parking garage across the street. My hands were unsteady as I scrolled through the screenshots. The first showed a project log for the Hartley account, the same one Marshall accused me of mishandling. But the timestamps were wrong. Notes I had never written appeared under my name. Work I had completed had been removed and replaced with errors. He had forged them. Someone had gone into the system, changed the entries and made it look like I had been careless for weeks. The next screenshot showed an email chain with my name in the sender line. But the writing style wasn't mine. The phrasing was off. The tone felt stiff and strange. To anyone who didn't know me, it would look completely real. I kept scrolling. File after file. Screenshot after screenshot. Each one showed a different layer of the setup Marshall had built around me. My stomach turned. I sat alone in the dark of that parking garage, trying to understand how long this must have taken to plan. How long he had been waiting for the right moment to use it. Then Danica texted again. You're not the first person he's done this to. But you can be the last. I need to tell you who I actually am because Marshall spent months trying to rewrite that story. My name is Madeline Pierce. I had worked at Callaway Creative Group for 4 years as a project coordinator. I was the person who remembered every deadline, caught every mistake before it reached a client, and stayed late without being asked. I was never loud about any of it. I just did the work. I had trained 3 junior staff members who now ran their own accounts. I had saved the Hartley campaign twice, once when the original creative lead quit without warning, and again when a vendor delivered the wrong materials 2 days before launch. Marshall Keene was my direct supervisor. He had been with the company for 11 years and had built a reputation as someone who delivered results. What people didn't see was how those results were actually delivered. He took credit quietly. He shifted blame carefully. And he was very good at making talented people feel like they needed him to survive. When praise started coming my way from above, things between us changed. I noticed it slowly at first. Then all at once. It started the afternoon the VP, Mr. Harmon, stopped by my desk to personally thank me for saving the Hartley launch. He shook my hand in front of the whole department and said it was some of the best crisis management he had seen in years. I was genuinely grateful. I had worked hard for that moment. But when I glanced across the office, Marshall was standing near the copy room, watching. He wasn't smiling. His face was flat and unreadable, and he looked away the moment our eyes met. After that, things shifted. Meetings I was supposed to attend got quietly canceled without explanation. Emails I should have been copied on arrived without my name. Once I asked Marshall about a client briefing I had been left out of, and he told me it was just a scheduling error. Kept happening. Every week something small. Something easy to explain away on its own. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I wasn't. Then Danica messaged me asking for a video call. "You need to hear this in my voice," she said. "There are things I can't put in a text." Danica appeared on screen looking tired. Not from a bad night's sleep, but the kind of tired that settles into someone after years of carrying something heavy. She had dark circles under her eyes and kept glancing off to the side, like she was making sure no one else was in the room with her. "Thank you for getting on the call," she said quietly. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. She paused. "Because I didn't do it soon enough for the last person. And I've spent 2 years trying to live with that." She explained Marshall's pattern. Smart, capable women who started getting noticed by management would suddenly find themselves reassigned, sidelined, or quietly pushed until they left. He was careful. He never did anything obvious. "He builds a case slowly," Danica said. "By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the person is already gone." I thought about the canceled meetings, the missing emails, the way he had watched me from across the office after Mr. Harmon's compliment. It had all been deliberate. Then Danica leaned forward. "He's currently under an internal investigation. Has been for 6 weeks. But no one has told you that, have they?" I stared at the screen. I had no idea. Danica talked for another 30 minutes. She explained that Marshall had been quietly accused of overbilling a client 2 years ago, but the evidence had been buried before it reached senior management. She had been married to him at the time. She had seen the documents and heard the phone calls herself. "He needed someone to take the fall if it ever resurfaced," she said. "When Mr. Harmon started paying attention to you, you became the most convenient option." After the call, she sent me 2 audio recordings. I sat in my kitchen in the dark and listened to both of them. In the first, Marshall's voice was calm and relaxed. He was talking to someone about how easy it was to shift blame onto a person who trusted you. He laughed while he said it. In the second, he mentioned me directly. "She thinks she's untouchable right now. Give it 2 weeks." My hands went cold. I placed my phone face down on the counter and sat without moving. Then my email pinged. HR had sent a formal message requesting my presence the following morning for an official review meeting. I hadn't even unpacked my briefcase yet. I arrived at the HR office at 9 the next morning. The woman across the desk, Carol, had a thin smile and a thick folder in front of her. She slid 3 documents toward me before I had even taken off my coat. "We've reviewed the concerns raised about your work on the Hartley account," she said in a flat, practiced tone. I looked at the documents. Records of errors, missed deadlines, incorrect client notes, a billing discrepancy. All under my name. All forged. "These aren't accurate," I said. Carol didn't blink. "We have system records confirming every entry." "Those records have been altered," I replied. "I can prove it." She folded her hands on the desk. "If you're unwilling to take responsibility for what's in front of you, this could move to legal action." I looked at her carefully. She wasn't there to listen. This wasn't an investigation. It was a trap designed to get me to sign something before I understood what was really happening. I picked up my bag. I understand, I said quietly. I'll be in touch. I walked out of that office with my spine straight and my mind already working. Marshall had thought this through carefully. But he had made one critical mistake. He had completely underestimated me. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after leaving HR, gripping the steering wheel and staring straight ahead. My body was shaking not from fear, but from the kind of quiet, focused anger that doesn't go away when you cry. The kind that turns into something useful if you let it. I kept hearing Danica's words in my head. You're not the first, but you can be the last. I had two options. I could do what Marshall expected, panic, maybe take a settlement and disappear quietly. Or I could fight back the right way with evidence so solid that no one could ignore it. I had spent 4 years being underestimated in that office. I had saved every email, kept personal copies of every project file, written detailed notes on every client meeting because I believed in being prepared for anything. It turned out I had been preparing for exactly this. I picked up my phone and texted Danica. I'm in. Tell me what to do. Her reply came within seconds. Pull every email, every file, and every calendar entry from the past 60 days. Every single thing Marshall touched. I started that night. I worked through the night at my kitchen table with my laptop, 2 notebooks, and a cold cup of coffee I kept forgetting to drink. Danica had told me to build a timeline. A clear, detailed record of every interaction, every project, and every decision I had made over the past 2 months. I started from the day Mr. Harmon stopped by my desk to thank me publicly. That was when everything changed with Marshall, and I needed to show that clearly. I went through every email, every calendar invite, every saved version of every document. I printed what I could and organized the rest into clearly labeled digital folders. Then around 2 in the morning I found something that made me stop completely. An email sent from my work account at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. An email I had never written. I had been at dinner with a friend that evening. I had the receipt and the photos to prove it. Someone had logged into my account while I was nowhere near my desk. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I took a screenshot and sent it straight to Danica. Her reply came back in 3 words. He slipped. Good. I spent the next day going deeper into that forged email. My background in copywriting had trained me to notice how people use language, the words they choose, the rhythm of their sentences, the way they open and close a thought. The email under my name didn't sound like me. I used short, direct sentences. Whoever wrote this one used long, formal phrases and passive constructions I never touched. The punctuation pattern was different. The sign-off was wrong. Even the spacing didn't match how my email client formatted by default. I documented every inconsistency carefully. I wrote a side-by-side comparison between the forged email and 5 real emails I had sent to the same client, highlighting every difference in detail. Then I pulled the file metadata and found that the document had been edited from a device that wasn't assigned to me. I organized everything into a section of my evidence folder labeled Forgery Thread. Then I sent it all to Danica. This is exactly what we need, she replied. She paused, then added, There's someone inside the building who wants to help you. Someone who saw things he was too afraid to report. I stared at the message. I had no idea who she meant. I didn't have to wait long. The message came the next afternoon from a number I didn't immediately recognize. Then the name appeared in the preview. Theo Wallace. I knew Theo, a junior account manager who sat 2 rows from my old desk. Quiet, careful, the kind of person who noticed everything but rarely said much about any of it. Madeline. I heard what happened. I want to help. Can we talk off the record? I called him back immediately. He was nervous. His voice was low, like he was afraid of being overheard. He told me that 2 weeks before my suspension, he had seen Marshall and someone from IT staying late together near the server room. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. But when he heard I had been suspended for account errors, something clicked into place. I knew you didn't make those mistakes, he said. I watched you on the Hartley campaign. You were the only one holding it together. I asked him to write down everything he remembered, dates, times, exactly what he saw. He agreed without hesitation. Then, before we hung up, he lowered his voice even further. There's a rumor going around, he said carefully, that Marshall paid someone in IT to help him cover his tracks. Theo made the introduction the next morning. The IT staffer asked me not to use his name. He agreed to speak only through a messaging app that deleted conversations after 24 hours. He was scared and he made that very clear from the start. But what he shared was exactly what I needed. 3 weeks before my suspension, Marshall had submitted an internal request to access the server logs for my account specifically. Not the whole department, just mine. The request was framed to look routine, but the IT staffer had noticed it was unusual and kept a private record of it out of caution. He couldn't testify formally. He was afraid of losing his job, but he was willing to share the metadata. Timestamps, access records, and a log showing that edits had been made to my files from a workstation that was not assigned to me. He sent everything before the chat window expired. I added it straight to my evidence folder. That evening I spread everything across my kitchen table. The forged emails, the access logs, the audio recordings, Theo's written statement, Danica's documents. A complete timeline was forming clearly. Marshall had been building this setup for at least 3 weeks before the day he humiliated me. And now I could prove every part of it. I spent 2 full days turning everything into a formal written report. I treated it the way I would treat any major work presentation, organized, clearly labeled, and every claim supported by attached evidence. The report opened with a simple summary, what I had been accused of, the date of the public suspension, and who had issued it. Then it moved through the evidence in order, the forged timestamps, the linguistic analysis of the email, the IT access logs, the audio recordings, and Theo's written account. Every section was numbered. Every piece of evidence was attached and labeled. I read through the entire thing 3 times before I was satisfied. Then I made a decision. I was not going back to HR. Carol had already shown me how that meeting would go. Instead, I sent the full report directly to Mr. Harmon, bypassing every layer in between. Then I waited. His reply came 4 hours later. Short and direct. Meet me tomorrow morning. Don't tell Marshall. I read those 2 sentences 3 times. For the first time since being walked out of that building, I felt something other than dread. I felt like the ground was shifting back beneath my feet, this time firmly in my favor. Mr. Harmon's office was on the top floor. I had only been up there twice in 4 years. He was already standing when I walked in. He shook my hand, gestured toward the chair across from his desk, and waited until the door was fully closed before speaking. I read your report last night, he said. All of it. And? I asked. I'm angry. He said it plainly. Not at me. His expression made that perfectly clear. If this is accurate, we have a serious problem that reaches well beyond you and Marshall. He asked me to walk him through the evidence in person. I did section by section calmly and clearly. He listened without interrupting, examined every attachment, and asked careful, precise questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. I'll be involving legal and compliance, he said. I need all original files. I handed over the drive I had prepared the night before. Then he looked at me with a serious expression. There's one piece still missing, he said. Something personal. Something Marshall would never willingly let surface. Without it, his legal team will frame this as a conflict between coworkers. He paused. Do you have anything like that? I thought immediately of Danica. I might, I said quietly. I called Danica that same evening and told her exactly what Mr. Harmon had said. We were close, but we needed one more piece. Something that couldn't be argued away or explained as a misunderstanding. She went quiet on the other end of the line. For nearly a full minute, neither of us spoke. I have something, she finally said. I've had it for 2 years. Her voice was careful and measured. It's a recording from an argument we had the year before our divorce. Marshall didn't know I was taping it. What's on it? I asked. Him talking about the overbilling. In detail. How the scheme worked. How long it had been running. The names of the people involved. She paused. And he talks about using someone at the company as his cover story if it ever got looked at seriously. I sat completely still. Why haven't you shared this before? I asked. She was quiet again. Because I was scared. He has a way of making you feel like no matter what you do, he's already prepared the countermove. Then she took a slow breath. But I'm done being afraid of him. A long pause. If I give you this, Madeline, everything changes. The recording arrived early the next morning. I sat at my kitchen table, pressed play, and didn't move for the next 14 minutes. Marshall's voice came through clearly. He sounded relaxed, almost casual, as he described exactly how the overbilling scheme had worked. He named a vendor. He explained how invoices had been altered. He described a system for keeping the amount small enough to pass through routine audits without triggering any alerts. Then he said something that stopped me cold. If this ever gets looked at seriously, I need the trail pointing somewhere else. Someone who touches the accounts regularly and won't be able to explain the discrepancies. He paused. I've been laying that groundwork for a while now. He had been planning to use me as his cover long before Mr. Harmon ever praised my work. The suspension wasn't only about shutting me down for getting noticed. It was about protecting himself from an investigation that was already closing in around him. I forwarded the recording to Mr. Harmon with a single line. I believe this is the piece you were looking for. Then I sat back, closed my eyes, and took the first full breath I had managed in over a week. The trap he had built for me had just become the wall that would bury him. The next 3 days were the hardest part. Not because of the investigation itself, but because of Marshall. He started calling me the morning after I sent the recording to Mr. Harmon, as if he could somehow sense that the ground had shifted. I didn't answer. He called again that afternoon, then twice that evening. I let every call ring through to voicemail. Then the emails started. Formal at first, careful corporate language about resolving things professionally. Then less formal. More urgent. His composure was clearly starting to crack. On the 4th day, I came home from a walk to find him standing outside my apartment building. He wasn't aggressive. He just looked rattled and unsteady in a way I had never seen from him before. I walked past him without a word and went straight inside. That night, an HR notice arrived in my inbox. Marshall had filed a counterclaim accusing me of harassment. I stared at the screen. The man who had forged emails under my name, framed me for financial misconduct, and shown up uninvited outside my home, was accusing me of harassment. I forwarded the notice to Mr. Harmon and his legal contact immediately, with a full note documenting every unanswered call and his unannounced appearance at my building. Then I went to bed and slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The following morning, I made a decision that had been forming in the back of my mind for days. I was not going to let this move through one channel at a time. HR had already shown me where their priorities were. Marshall's counterclaim proved he would do absolutely anything to redirect attention away from himself. If I relied on a single contact, there was still a chance the evidence could be delayed or quietly managed behind closed doors. So instead, I sent the complete evidence packet, every file, every recording, every statement, and every piece of metadata, to Mr. Harmon, the legal department, the head of HR, and the compliance officer simultaneously. All 4. Same morning. Same email. Then I sent a final copy to my personal attorney with instructions to submit everything to the relevant regulatory body, if I didn't receive a formal response within 5 business days. I pressed send on the last email and sat back in my chair. It was out of my hands now. The evidence existed in multiple places at once. No single person could make it disappear. 20 minutes later, a calendar notification arrived on my phone. The event title read, Marshall Keene, Review Hearing. My attendance was listed as required. The date was 2 days away. I arrived at the hearing room 15 minutes early. It was a long conference room on the 3rd floor. Wide table, glass walls, people from legal and compliance seated along both sides. Mr. Harmon sat at the far end. Marshall sat near the middle, his expression carefully arranged into something meant to look calm. But his shoulders were tight. His hands were completely flat on the table. He looked like a man working very hard just to hold himself together. I sat down, opened my folder, and waited. When the compliance officer nodded at me to begin, I walked through the evidence exactly as I had with Mr. Harmon. Organized, clear, and calm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at Marshall once while I spoke. I simply presented the facts one section at a time, and let them stand on their own. The forged timestamps, the access logs, the IT metadata, the audio recordings, the linguistic analysis of the email. I watched the faces around the table shift as I moved through each piece. Some people stopped writing and just listened. When I finished, the room was completely silent. Then the door at the back of the room opened. Every head turned at once. Danica Keene walked in. No one had known she was coming. Not even Mr. Harmon, judging by his expression. Danica walked to the empty chair beside me, placed a sealed envelope on the table and sat down. She was composed and steady, completely different from the tired, cautious woman I had seen on the video call weeks ago. Marshall had gone completely pale. "I was married to Marshall Keene for 7 years, she said, addressing the whole room. "I have direct knowledge of the financial misconduct described in this case. My sworn statement is in that envelope, and I personally provided the original audio recordings already submitted to this committee." Marshall's attorney leaned over and began whispering urgently beside him. "Those recordings were made without my consent," Marshall said, his voice sharper than he intended. The compliance officer responded calmly. "They were recorded in a private residence by one of the two parties present. That is legally permissible in this state." Marshall tried to interrupt twice more. Each time, someone at the table corrected him directly and moved on. I watched him lose ground with every passing minute. The man who had stood over me with total certainty, who had thrown a folder at my feet and sent me out with security, was falling apart in front of everyone. Then the compliance officer looked at him steadily. "Mr. Keene, I need you to step outside." The room stayed quiet after Marshall walked out. Raised voices came from the hallway, Marshall's mostly. Then another voice, lower and more firm. The exchange lasted about 4 minutes before it went silent. When the compliance officer returned, he looked at Mr. Harmon first, then at the rest of the table. "Mr. Keene has been informed of his termination, effective immediately. A formal investigation into the financial irregularities will be opened. Legal proceedings are pending." No one clapped. No one made a sound. The room stayed professional and completely still. I sat without moving. I had imagined this moment many times over the past 2 weeks. I thought I might feel triumphant or deeply relieved, or maybe something complicated about the years I had given to a company that had almost allowed this to happen to me. But what I actually felt was much simpler than any of that. Peace. Quiet, steady, uncomplicated peace. I glanced toward the hallway once. Marshall was speaking to a man I didn't recognize, his shoulders hunched, his posture nothing like the man who had thrown a folder at my feet 2 weeks before. I turned back to the table. Mr. Harmon was watching me. "Can you stay behind?" he asked quietly. Everyone else filed out until it was just Mr. Harmon and me. He stood by the window, looking out over the city for a moment before turning to face me. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Not just on behalf of the company. Personally. I should have paid much closer attention." I nodded and accepted it without making it larger than it needed to be. "You are formally cleared of all accusations," he continued. "Your file will be corrected to reflect that completely." "Thank you," I said. He reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward me. "I'd like to offer you Marshall's former position. Director of Client Operations. Better compensation. Direct access to senior leadership. A real chance to shape how this department moves forward." I looked at the folder. I thought about the walk through the office with security 2 steps behind me. The HR meeting designed to corner me before I understood what was happening. The nights at my kitchen table building a case that should never have been necessary. The 4 years of excellent work done quietly and without enough recognition. Then I picked it up. "I accept," I said. "And I want to talk about how we make sure this never happens to anyone else here." Mr. Harmon looked at me steadily. "That's exactly the conversation I was hoping to have with you." 3 days later, I received one final text from Danica. "It's over. Thank you for being braver than I could be." I sat with that message for a long time. She had carried that recording for 2 full years, waiting until she was finally ready to use it. I didn't judge her for that. I understood it more than most people ever would. I typed back. "You were brave enough when it mattered. That's all it ever takes." Then I blocked her number. Not out of anger. Not because I didn't care. But because we had each given the other what was needed. And sometimes the most respectful thing you can do after something painful is close it with intention rather than letting it quietly fade. On my first Monday as Director of Client Operations, I walked through the same entrance where security had escorted me out 3 weeks before. Past the same cubicles. The same break room. The same wall of campaign awards. People looked up as I passed. This time no one looked away. I sat down at my new desk, opened my laptop and got to work. Marshall's name was rarely spoken in that office again. And mine was spoken differently from that day forward, with a kind of quiet respect that never needs to announce itself. I hadn't set out to destroy him. I had simply refused to be buried. And I built everything I deserved right above the ruins he left behind.